So I think we'll get started. Thanks for waving. This is great. So my name is Aileen Bright and I'm the Globe Country Coordinator here in Ireland. And we have with us today Orla Condon from the Globe team. And we have Rob Nelson, we have Claire Patton, and they're from Green Schools. And we're all part of Antashka. And we are so excited to be hosting this webinar today for Tree Day in Ireland. And we have a very special guest with us today. We have Brian Campbell joining us. He's a NASA scientist. I'm sure you're all very excited to hear from Brian. And could we just share screen, Orla, the first? I'm just going to show you the agenda for today. So we have a great lineup. And after I speak, we will be passing things over to Brian, and his presentation is entitled Looking at Trees from the Ground with Globe and from Space with NASA, and connecting those observations. So that'll be really interesting to hear from him. Then we'll pass over to Orla, and she'll talk about some autumn activities you can do with Globe. And then we'll be hopping on over to Green Schools, and we'll have some autumn tips there from Rob, which we're looking forward to. And then after all of that, we will have a question and answer session. So we want everyone to be thinking of questions all the way through this webinar. So if you have questions, your teacher is going to have to type them into the chat box. And then when we get to that session, just after 1:30, we'll go through and Claire will read out some of your questions. And Brian is very excited to answer your questions, as we all are. So please put them in the chat box. Just a couple of things, just if you could remain muted, that would be fantastic, just out of respect for everyone. And then this session is being recorded, just so you know. And just have fun and enjoy the whole hour. Okay, and then just next slide, Orla. I'm just conscious that, I think everyone's familiar with Green Schools. You might not be familiar with Globe. So Globe is an international science and education program, and it is sponsored by NASA in the States. So hence we have Brian Campbell here. And we, in Ireland, are sponsored by the EPA, that's the Environmental Protection Agency. And here in our small Globe team in Ireland, we run many campaigns across a lot of different areas, like air quality and water quality. We work on phenology, which we'll hear a bit about today, and many different topics. So keep an eye out for Globe Ireland if you're ever interested in working on citizen science. Just a couple of things about Brian. We are lucky to have him here today for a couple of reasons. Well, one is that he's in his 24th year with NASA, so he knows a lot, which we're very excited to have him here. The other thing is that his general engagement with Globe is on a campaign called Trees Around the Globe. So for Tree Day, it's great to have him here too, because he knows a lot about trees from space, and that's what we're going to hear about today. And the last thing I want to say about Brian is that he is a great supporter of Globe students. And you cannot meet a better person in terms of engaging with students and encouraging students and listening to students. So that's another reason why we're very grateful to have him here, and why he'll be great at answering some of your questions. Okay, so at this point, I am very excited to hand over to Brian, and he'll do a short presentation. So thank you so much, Brian. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, Aileen and Orly, for the invitation. And yeah, great to be here. It's about 8:06 in the morning here in the States. I'm coming to you from Maryland. I actually work at the NASA Wallace Flight Facility in Virginia. It's, about 40 kilometers away from where I live. So it's not too bad a drive, not much traffic, which is good. I used to live near Washington, D.C. in the States, which there is a lot of traffic. Takes, a long time to get anywhere you need to go. But let me go ahead and share my screen with a presentation that I put together for you today. And happy National Ireland Tree Day today. So that's so exciting. I was talking to the folks earlier that we have Arbor Day in the United States, which falls around April 25th every year. So we're excited that lots of countries around the world, including Ireland, have tree days. So, all right, let me go ahead and share this here. All right, how does that look from your end, Eileen?
That's good, Brian. Yeah, perfect.
Excellent, perfect. All right, so You should recognize what you see in the background there. That is Ireland, and I'll show you a little closer view of this and why this is an important image because it's a extremely rare image. But what you're seeing on this image, and we'll go into this a little further, is that you're seeing lots of green. Okay, yes, Ireland, the Emerald Isle, okay, it's associated with green, but often you are covered in lots of clouds. Okay, this happened to be a day where you were completely cloud free. And that's kind of a teaser because I have something that I want to show you a little later on. But first, since I'm at NASA, and thank you for the introduction, Eileen, it's great. Um, but we have a lot of satellites flying through space, and a lot of them are looking at parts of our solar system and the Milky Way and other planets. But very many of them, even more of them, are launched into space, turned around, and they look at things on the Earth. And I like to show this video here. There's no sound to this, so I'll be talking through it. But this is what's called leaf area index, or basically what you're looking at is vegetation. So you're looking at trees and plants and grass and forest. And that's what you're going to see here moving up and down. This is showing you how the seasons change. And where you see it the greenest, of course, that's going to be in the spring and summer. And where you see the green moving further north and further south, south, you're going to see basically the green up, when things start blooming. And when you see it moving back down again, that's going to be the green down. But we call this the breath of the planet. So it's an interesting visualization at NASA where you can actually see, especially look in parts of Canada and even, near Russia, you can see, where the winter season is versus where the summer season is based upon this satellite data of where the vegetation is during the year. And I like to show that as an introduction because it starts us thinking about, trees and the process of that you may know of photosynthesis, when trees pull in carbon dioxide and use the sun's energy, and they pull in this carbon dioxide and convert it to the breathable oxygen that we breathe every day, okay, through this process. So here's this picture again on the left side. That's what I showed you earlier. It's just zoomed out a little bit. This is Ireland on a cloudless day, and this is the 26th of March of 2012. So 12 years ago, a little over 12 years ago, and that's the last time we really had a satellite image like this. On the right, what I'm showing you are where the Globe Ireland tree height observations are that are in the Globe program database, the Globe program that Eileen mentioned earlier today there, in the introduction. So you can see, there's a lot of places in Ireland where we don't have tree observations, and that's not to say that Ireland's not doing a good job. You're doing a great job. Every country in the world has lots of open space where we're not actually getting tree hut observations because we know there aren't people there who know about the GLOBE program and know, to take these tree height observations. But I wanted to show you this because this is a super rare picture over here, and then we have, the tree height observations in the GLOBE database. So how do we measure these things? How do we measure our things around the Earth? So we have these satellites moving around all the time, and they measure everything from looking at clouds to soil moisture to ice and snow. And for our purposes here is we have several missions that actually look at tree height from space. Okay, you may think that's kind of wild that, how are we measuring tree height from a satellite that is 300 to 400 kilometers above the Earth? How do we do that? Well, we do that with cool things called lasers. And a lot of you have heard you all know what a laser is probably. There's laser pens out there. You might have, watched, a science fiction movie with spaceships shooting lasers and things like that. So what these satellites do, essentially, several of these, one's called ICESat-2, and I'll talk about that in a second. One's called JEDI. It sounds like something from Star Wars, doesn't it? It's spelled a little different. It's GEDI versus JEDI. But it fires lasers from these satellites and instruments, and we calculate the time it takes the lasers to leave the satellite, bounce off something on the Earth like a treetop, and then come back to the satellite. Every 91 days, we're going to hit that same spot on Earth with one of the satellites. So what that means is if we measure the time it takes the lasers to leave the satellite, hit the Earth's surface, and come back again, like the top of a tree, that time can be converted into a tree height. And then when we measure it again, 91 days, and if we get the same amount of time for that photon, the laser to travel, that means the tree hasn't gotten taller or gotten smaller. But if we see that there was a change in that time, we're able to see the tree grew. Maybe the tree was measured in the wintertime when there were no leaves on it. And then it was measured again, in the springtime when the leaves were on it, or the summertime. And we see an increase in height of that tree. We're able to do that from space. The ICESat-2 satellite, as you can see here on the left, okay, this is what the satellite looks like. This is just showing, this is an artist rendition of what it looks like in space after it was launched. And it was launched, you can see here, on September 15th, 2018. So just over 6 years ago. And so it's firing these laser pulses at 10,000 times per second. So we get a lot of data in a short amount of time. Now, since it's called ICESat-2, its primary objective is to look at the ice and how fast it's melting in Greenland and Antarctica and other parts of the Arctic and, Alaska, and areas that are really susceptible to climate change or global warming. And then we have this instrument here called JEDI, Global Ecosystems Dynamics Investigation. I know that's a bunch of big words. We just call it JEDI. And it's an instrument that is on the International Space Station right now, and it measures the height of trees in the mid-latitudes between, you can see the orbits here that it doesn't, ICESat-2 covers the entire planet. You can see with this image here on the left. And JEDI only covers this part because it's on the International Space Station, so it has to follow the orbit of the International Space Station. But these two missions together give us literally right now over a few hundred billion tree height measurements from space of trees on Earth. And we are hoping to hit that trillion soon because there are over 3 trillion trees on the planet. And we will never be able to measure all of these with satellites. And that's when, you come in with the GLOBE program to measure tree height from the ground. And a comparison between tree heights from the ground and tree heights from space, having that comparison data really helps out student researchers who are part of the GLOBE program, what's called the International Virtual Science Symposium, IVSS, every year, but then also help professional researchers as well have that extra layer of data that you've taken from the ground with the GLOBE program. So they have the satellite data. They can access the satellite data anytime. They can also access the GLOBE data at any time. And having those 2 to 3 data sets from ICESat-2, from the JEDI mission, from GLOBE, from students and citizen scientists measuring the trees on the ground, it really helps out scientists and with enough data in areas all around the world. So as I mentioned, ICESat-2 uses something called lasers. The scientific term for it is LIDAR. It stands for light detection and ranging. So we're measuring basically the height of things with these lasers. What's cool about this is that, as I mentioned, we fire off lasers 10,000 times per second, and we're able to bounce off the top of trees like you see here, and we can figure out how all those trees change in height over time, okay? Now I'm going to show you a brief video here. This is a fun little video. So for every laser pulse that the satellite sends out, it releases about 300 trillion photons, and that's just these little, I'm just going to call them little balls of light, okay? So as they travel at the speed of light from the satellite to the Earth, okay, they're traveling super fast, and then they come back to the satellite. So the ICESat-2 mission has a mascot named Fo the Photon, okay? And I wanted to show you this because students usually really love this video, and it's showing you the flight of one of these photons in an animated form, basically showing you what I just talked about leaving the satellite, hitting the ground, and coming back again. So let me show you this, and then we'll talk in the next, in the last 5 minutes or so, more about trees and how you can do this and why they're so important, why tree height is such an important, uh, I'm going to say simple yet important measurement that you can take.
Attention photons. Prepare to measure Earth's changing ice. Laser pulse 22A4 departs in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Excellent job, Bo.
They can't repeat my Christmas. Okay, God,
You gotta say.
I'm just going to turn off our speaker. Worked yesterday.
All right. So since I showed you a, kind of a funny, and a fun concept of how we measure these things, let's talk a little bit more about, why we're doing this. And as I mentioned earlier, we have over 3 trillion trees on Earth right now. Okay, we have over 3 trillion trees, about 78,000 tree species, and a couple little numbers I pulled up here is, there's approximately 709 million trees in Ireland, and about 11% of Ireland is covered by forest. And some of these trees that you may know, like oak, ash, hazel, birch, Scots pine, rowan, and willow, are some of the most native trees. And Ireland, and I don't know the whole status of this, but I was reading some articles about the Irish government planning to plant several hundred million trees by 2040 to help reduce greenhouse gas emissions, and that is absolutely amazing. There's lots of countries around the world that I wish would replicate this. There are some. I mean, there's some the big tree plantings happening in India, in China, in the United States. So a lot is happening, and they understand the simplicity of planting trees and how complex the results of that is, as that is for helping work in climate change, because trees are what are called indicators of a changing climate. And I know there's a lot going on this image right here, but I just wanted to showcase a couple things here. Is that one of the major things that the trees are important, when we measure tree height, is that you know where we have lots of trees often says how healthy the environment or the ecosystem is in that location where all the trees are. And honestly, where there's lots of trees, people and animals breathe better, because there's more oxygen, there's more carbon dioxide being pulled out of the atmosphere. Carbon dioxide is one of those, it's a pollutant basically in the atmosphere. And we love that trees pull all that carbon dioxide, well, I shouldn't say all, as much as they possibly can. There's areas where there's lots of forested areas where there's lots of trees. Of course, more carbon dioxide is pulled out of the atmosphere. That's one of the ways. That's one of the reasons why big cities where there's lots of carbon dioxide from people, from motor vehicles, from businesses and industries, they're planting more trees in cities and urban areas because they need to offset the amount of carbon dioxide being produced with the trees pulling in that carbon dioxide and making creating more oxygen in these cities. So that's one of the huge things where they're planting trees in the city areas, on the roofs of buildings, in the roofs of home, on the roofs of homes. So lots of programs out there that are actually doing that. So in the final couple of minutes here, we have a program called the Globe program called the Globe Observer, and the Globe Observer is a way that you can use a cell phone or even like a tablet, even like an iPad or some type of tablet, Android tablet, to measure the height of trees. Because inside a phone there's a device, and it's a big term called a magnetometer. It's something that allows you to measure angles with your phone. Okay, it's just a nice tool that's in your phone. So you're able to measure the height of trees by measuring angles using your phone's internal system and the camera on your phone. It's based upon how tall you are, and it's a lot of things going on here. But this is a whole nother presentation. But there's a lot of things going on here. But what we did was, when we created this app, and I should say it's a free app, but when we created this app, we designed it to be easy to use, and that you don't have to put out a lot of your information, and you just register via an email. That's all. But we built all the mathematics into it, what's called trigonometry, basically measuring angles to figure out how tall a tree is based upon using your phone's camera, using your phone's device, and how tall you are, and what your normal pace is. There's a lot that goes into that. I'm sorry, but we have it set up that once you figure out how to do it, you can measure tree heights from the ground using this in about 30 seconds to a minute. And just that one single measurement is vital to scientists around the world, from student scientists to adult scientists. So, yeah, so we have those two things. We actually have what's called a handheld clinometer with the Globe program. It's more of a manual way to measuring angles, where you do the math involved. And like I said, in the trees tool for Globe Observer, we program the math into the unit, into the app. So finally, what I want to mention here is that scientists use this data. Here is a comparison that I did of when ICET-2 dropped a photon near our property. I live in Salisbury, Maryland, as I mentioned, in the United States. And it's right near the Pacific Ocean. We're about 35 minutes from the Atlantic Ocean. What's cool about this is that you can compare the data that ICET-2 gets, or even JEDI, but this has to be ICET-2, the tree height that ICET-2 gets with the tree height that you get using the Globe Observer Trees tool. And you can see here in this box right here, the box that says ICET-2, ICET-2 measured the tree heights here at 19.66 meters. I use a Globe Observer, and I measured them at 18.93 meters. It's not exact, but it's very, very close. And often this is the result that students have gotten around the world, where they look at the ICET-2 data from NASA and they look at their own data, and they see it's a pretty good comparison. I mean, there are folks that get it and they're way off, but then it could have been a user error. I mean, it could have been a satellite error, but it's one of these things that if you get discrepancies like that, it's a way to try to figure out why is there such a difference. But with this, scientists use the tree height data from Globe. They use it in professional papers, in presentations, and talking like presentations like this to groups around the world. So how do we tie all these together? And then there's one slide after this, kind of bringing some things together with Ireland. But this is a brief video. It's a promo showing you how we tie in the Globe program tree height observations with the NASA satellite data. All right, so that was a little tie in there, and I wanted to end with this one here. This is some of the tree heights that we recently received from Globe Ireland. You can see here there's some locations that we have from around Ireland, from Kildare to Galway to Cork and Dublin and Mount Marion. You can see here this is some of the really cool tree heights and the numbers that were associated with them. So keep these observations coming. And if you haven't taken any already, talk with, the folks that are here with the Globe Ireland program and learn more about it. So I will end here and I will stay around till the end, of course, for any questions. So let me stop sharing and I will pass it back to you, Arlene.
Thank you so much, Brian. And we are delighted that you are going to stay around because there are many questions. So you may want to clear your calendar for the rest of the day to try and answer some of these. No, but absolutely fantastic presentation. And really happy to see some of the observations that were made by Irish students featured there. So that's fantastic. Delighted to see that. I'm going to pass over now to Orla because she's going to talk a little bit about the kind of activities you can do with Globe in Ireland during the autumn. So off you go, Orla.
Great, thanks for that, Aileen. I hope you can all see my screen okay. So we're going to talk about Globe Ireland and autumn activities that you can carry out. So goes next slide. So one campaign that's on at the moment is called Green Down, which we saw in the video at the start of Brian's presentation where we could see the green literally changing from the satellite images. And so we want you guys to get out and track the leaves in the trees in your school. So this is a campaign across Europe and Eurasia. And at the moment, there's 288 schools signed up for this autumn's campaign. It'll be going again in spring. So if you haven't signed up for this one, you can do it in spring. In spring, it'll be green up. And of those 288, we have nearly 30 Irish schools, which is fantastic to see. So they're out and about. Maybe you guys here are one of them, which is great. We hope you're enjoying it, going out and about and using our colour guide and tracking the colours of the leaves as they change. So that's one of the activities you can do in autumn. Then the next one I'm going to talk about is, Brian has already mentioned this as well in his presentation about using the Globe Observer app and why we should measure tree height. Well, as we saw, we want to help NASA. Don't we all want to help NASA out there, everyone? And of course, you'll get to know your own trees better. And then you can also use the tree height to calculate how much carbon is stored in the trees in your school. So this is just a screenshot from the app, and you can see there's lots of benefits and there's lots of reasons why NASA want us to help. Then these are other screenshots from the app as well. I'm not going to go into this in too much detail. Again, Brian has talked about this already, but this is just to show you how easy the app is to use. You don't need to be really technical or anything like that. It just asks a few basic questions, and then like we saw in the little video there, you can just use the camera on your phone and it will help you get the height of trees around your school. And then the final activity that I'm going to mention is a challenge that the Globe Regional Office in Europe and Eurasia are currently running. So it's called the Tree Reporters Challenge. So they want all of you to go outside and pick a tree and interview the tree. Now, I know what you're thinking, how can you interview a tree? But they want you to get as creative as possible. You could make a little video of you talking to the tree, or you could write it as if you're writing an article for a magazine or a newspaper. And they want you to come up with like a few questions that you would ask the tree and then come up with how you'd answer them. So you could use the app to investigate the height of the tree and come up with an answer that way. And you could carry out other little investigations to come up with the answers to your questions. So those are a few things that we would love to see you get out and do from Globe Ireland. I'm now going to pass over to Rob from Green Schools.
That's great, Orla. Can you put into presentation mode on that?
I'm sorry.
Not sure which format it is in. We could see all the slides clearly. It's just that it might be a bit clearer if it was in presentation mode.
There we go. Perfect. Sorry about no
No
Perfect.
problem.
No worries.
Perfect. There we go.
Okay, so you can go to the next slide. So my name is Rob, and I work with Green Schools, and I'm one of the biodiversity team. I also work with one of our programs in Nantashiga called LEAF. So a lot of what I'm going to talk about is work that we do with LEAF and about woodlands. So we can go to the next slide. So how can we help? We've heard a lot about trees, and we have a lot of resources that you can do. So some of the things have been talked about in apps, but if you wanted to go out and measure the height of a tree, we actually have a low-tech way of doing that as well. So you could nearly do both and check if our low-tech works. So we have some resources on our website, and we'll share these slides and resources in the chat as well. So you can learn about our native trees. We have a good number of native trees in Ireland. As Brian said, 11% of Ireland is covered in forest, but actually only about 1% of that is our native trees. So it's important to start to increase that and plant the species that give us the best amount of biodiversity. So you can learn how to age the tree without cutting it down. We know that we can count the rings and we get an age, but you can do aging of the tree without doing that, and you can learn the height. And for maybe your secondary school students, you might be able to then go on and learn about what the tree is made out of and calculate the carbon content. So that could add to that conversation that Orla mentioned with your tree. You could add the age, you could add the height, you could say, well, this tree has been capturing carbon for a long time. You could look at, well, if it's lived through these amount of ages, what history has that tree seen and what weather has been around? Orla, you can go to the next slide. So we encourage you to create a woodland habitat. So you can do that by collecting leaves that have fallen twigs, branches, log piles. They're all encourage different levels of biodiversity into your school grounds or into your nearby parks. And they create corridors for animals like frogs and hedgehogs and your mini beasts, habitats for them. So place them under your trees and hedgerows, habitats for overwintering creatures that might hibernate in those. And even you could create things like dead hedges. I have seen that in a few schools, which are like little highways for our animals to hide away from the prey that might be looking to eat them. Or you can go to the next slide. So we encourage also that you plant native trees and shrubs and flowers, and you can start by collecting seeds from your local parks. It's prime season now. I know that acorns will be falling in the last couple of high winds, and hazelnuts as well, and they're two very easily grown trees. So you could collect them, plant them in leaf, mulch and compost, and you could even do this in the school with old coffee cups or yogurt pots, and we have resources to help you do that as well. So we go to the next slide. We have our acorn growing guide, and there's actually videos as well on this on the Leaf Ireland website, and you can collect those seeds, grow them over school grounds over the year, and then have the students either bring them home with you or find a location for them in your school grounds or in your local areas. For maybe a secondary school or a school that has a big grounds or wants to do more, we also have a nursery guide, a tree nursery guide, about collecting all different types of native seeds, what processes you have to do to grow them, and you could even set up your own little nursery in your school, and that could provide a little forest in the future, or not. It doesn't even necessarily have to be within your school. You could provide these trees on to your local community groups. We go to the next slide. So we also have then, if you are looking at planting forests, maybe you'll go down the bare root season. So we're about to enter bare root season in Ireland. That's really when the leaf fall off the trees. We can take the smaller trees and we can plant them out. So we say from about November until March is our bare root season. And we have helpful guides there as well on the Leaf website on how to plant your bare root trees. Yeah, as I said, this is when the leaves are falling. They're ready to go out. And you could learn about our An Cuil Beag program for any Gaeilgeoirs amongst us, or Irish speakers, that is, Brian. An Cuil Beag is a tiny forest, or a small woodland, to be more precise. And green schools and Quilcha and Leaf have been planting small forests in school grounds and in college grounds and in community grounds for the last 5 years. So we've planted, I think, if I read it right, 6,000 to 7,000 trees in that space with those, and they become a little resource that the school and community can use to learn about trees. So it's not just a little forest, it's an educational program too. Go to the next slide, Laura. So yeah, so what is An Cuil Beag? It's a small, dense woodland. Unlike in some countries, they plant these as tiny forests. They fence them off and you can't access them. In Ireland, we have them as an open space. We have a space in the middle where it's an outdoor classroom, and it's linked with the LEAF program and with citizen science and woodland skills and nature connection and well-being. And you can see some pictures of us planting one school and then a much more mature one that's settled with the outdoors classroom space there in the bottom picture. We can go to the next slide. So alongside that, Green Schools our biodiversity team have reworked a new program for this year called Habitat Heroes. So we're introducing that at the moment. The web page just went live yesterday, and it is all about the different animals that might live in our little woodlands or in our school grounds. So they're habitat heroes, and we learn about those animals, and then we learn about the habitats they live in and what we might be able to do within the school grounds to promote those animals coming in. Because trees are just the starting point for the biodiversity. Some trees, like for example, the oak tree, might have up to 600 to 800 different species that call it home. So we can take actions to bring those animals and creatures, insects, birds, and native plants into our school grounds. And that's what the Habitat Heroes is promoting. We can go to the next slide. Yeah, so we are on 3-day. Does anyone know, we'll ask in the chat, what tree is being championed for 3-day here? So I have a couple of tips here on the screen. It's in full bloom in May with a flower that looks like that. And we have many nicknames, including the May bush for this tree. Are we getting any right answers? Have we got any answers at all? If I grow myself, oh, we have some Irish answers as well, some correct answers in there, and then I might be called the fairy tree. And yes, we can go to the next click again. We are the hawthorn tree, and the first answer was in Irish, so very well done to that school who got that. And yeah, so our hawthorn tree, seeing how we've been talking about heights, the height of the hawthorn tree, it can grow to 10 to 18 meters tall. Now, generally in Ireland, we plant it as a hedgerow, so we don't really let it get to that height. But if it was left alone, it could get to that. And it can live up to 700 years old. It grows really fast in the first 15 years of its life. And as I said, we plant it as hedgerows because it has little thorns and it's good for stopping our animals like cows going through the fields. It flowers in May to June with white, sometimes pinkish flowers. And then from July to November, so the time we're in at the moment, you might see the red berries that we call haws. And those haws are very important food for our winter birds. So it's a very important plant for that reason. It's deciduous, which means that it loses its leaves and it grows them back in spring. It saves its energy over the winter. It kind of goes to sleep, for want of a better way. And the tree can support up to 300 different species of animals, including bees, moths, small mammals, birds, and they feed on the haws and they nest in the branches, which are twisty and hold protection for them. As I said, it's known as the fairy tree in Ireland, so it has a playful and mischievous personality to it because it looks really nice, but also if you put your hand in it, it might get spiked. So it's associated with fairies, but not the bad type of fairies, it's the good type of fairies. And usually it's the one tree that's out on its own that's associated with that. For that reason, with our history, we don't like to cut it down. It's unlucky to cut down the hawthorn tree. And the hawthorn tree and the blackthorn tree are both associated with holy sites as well. So they're often planted near holy wells. And in other mythology, like the Norse or the Welsh mythology, they're associated with giants. In the Norse mythology, they're associated with Odin's father, who was called Baltthorn or Evil Thorn, and he turned into a giant hawthorn tree. And for those Harry Potter fans amongst us, Malfoy's wand is actually a hawthorn wand, and he's a bit mischievous as well, isn't he? So that's our tree of the day. We'll go on to the next slide. I think I have one more. Just for our secondary schools that are here, and all of those schools, actually primary schools in from 11 years up can enter our YRE program, which is another program that we run out of on Toshke. The reason I bring it up is because this year it's called Ecosystem Restoration is the theme for it. And it's a journal. You're already interviewing trees. It could be part of what you're doing if you're getting involved in that. And it's a competition for articles written about habitats, about photos, videos, and podcasts, and it's worth having a look, especially if you're in our secondary school. And if you're already out and looking and working on this, you might come across hedgerows, and we also said we'd promote this little hedgerow photography competition that's going until the end of the year. It's not really associated with us, but it seems like a good way to get you out and looking at what's growing and where it's growing. And hedgerows actually make up quite a lot of our trees in Ireland. We don't have huge amount of large forestry but we have a lot of hedgerows going. And our hawthorn obviously lives in our hedgerows. So I think that's me. So yeah, so basically we're going into questions now, yeah. So what we'll do now is we'll unmute all of the people who've spoken. And I think Claire has noted some of your questions in the chat, and she might ask some of them away. And I think, Brian, there's a few for you, so you might unmute and be ready to answer some.
Yep, I've been answering a bunch in the chat while
brilliant.
things are going on.
Yeah, thanks, Brian. I was noticing you got through a ton of questions in the chat, which is great, but I know some people might have missed those, so I might just highlight a few that got asked several times. So there was a lot of interest there in how you got to work with NASA. Maybe you could tell us a bit about what kind of training you had to do, or your kind of journey to get there. What made you want to work there? All of those types of things. There's lots of questions about.
Yeah. So yeah, I had a question about, did I always want to work for NASA? And I mean, yeah, not original. When I was a child, I was big into sports. So, and in the United States, baseball is a big thing. And I always wanted to be an American baseball player. And, as I got older, I started getting more into science, and then, I actually out of college, I went to college, took a lot of science and math and lots of cool things. So I have, I was what's called an undergraduate for 4 years, and then I got a degree, and then I went to graduate school, got a degree, and then I actually started my career teaching secondary school. So I taught ninth grade. It would have been Earth and Space Science and 12th grade physics for 4 years, and then after that, NASA was offering positions. They wanted people who were educators as well as scientists. So they wanted people with both experiences. So I thought this is great. So I could, work on the latest NASA science, but I can also, communicate it to communicate it to folks around the world, and also, help educate, students around the world as well, which is, this is great what we're doing here today. So yeah, I mean, NASA's, been kind of a dream of mine since I was, in later childhood, once I got over the you're not going to be a baseball player phase. And then, but yeah, I mean, NASA's a great place to work. Um, you know, Lots of math and science in the background. Um, my wife is a mathematician and she loves math and, is pretty good at science. I'm good at math. I don't necessarily enjoy it as much as she does, but I have to do it with the science, and, they work hand in hand. So yeah. I know a lot of students are like, oh, math and science, they're so hard. But if you really, if you have the good teachers and you're really interested in the material, NASA's a place that anybody from around the world can work. And you don't have to be just a scientist. You can be, I shouldn't say just, you don't have to be a scientist. You can be an engineer. You can be an auto mechanic. You can be an attorney or a lawyer, or you can be, a doctor or a nurse, because there's doctors and nurses who work with astronauts all the time, and the biology and health of astronauts. So, there's lots of jobs at NASA, not just, the scientists and engineers and astronauts that you hear of.
That's great, Brian. Really interesting. I know, I'm sure there's lots of people here interested in maybe getting into NASA one day. So there's actually an interesting question here from Tralee Educate Together. So they're it's a real fundamental question, I suppose. They want to know, how does knowing the tree height help? So why is that the focus of this project?
So yeah, so tree height, as I mentioned earlier, a little bit about photosynthesis, and knowing the height of a tree allows you to understand how much carbon dioxide a tree has pulled in from the atmosphere. Because as trees pull in carbon dioxide, they do, through photosynthesis, they do several things. They, absorb that carbon dioxide and convert it to oxygen. But then also, a tree, when it grows, it's pulling in that carbon dioxide, and as it's growing, it's storing that carbon dioxide, because the trees are primarily made up of carbon. The trunk, the branches, the roots, the leaves, they're made of, building blocks of matter, of carbon. So the larger a tree gets, the more carbon dioxide that has pulled in. And on our planet, we have something called a carbon budget. What that means is that we have so much carbon, in our Earth's atmosphere. We have a lot of carbon on the ground with trees and living things, but we have to try to find a balance. So we want to, with this carbon budget, we want to be able to get rid of more carbon dioxide, okay, than we're actually producing. And when we do that, it gives us a positive, a little more positive, outlook on our planet's response and our response to global warming or climate change. We want less carbon dioxide and we want more oxygen. Okay, and trees are the major source of, on our planet, of this carbon dioxide being pulled out of the atmosphere and converted into the breathable oxygen that we rely on every second of the day.
Brilliant. And again, this is another really interesting question from, I've forgotten their name, School Trasanefa. Where has this gone now? Oh yeah, they were wanted to ask, is it possible, or would it be possible, to power the satellites with renewable energy?
So I should mention that too. With the satellites have on board basically batteries, okay? But these big batteries are charged by the solar panels, okay? And there is a tiny bit of fuel on it, and I'll explain that in a second. But um, the satellites are powered by the sun, okay? They remain in space, they remain working because of the sunlight, because the way we have the orbits and how the satellites fly in space is that we have the the majority of the time they're in space, the solar panels are facing the sun, and we need that to power that. So if we just have the solar panels and nothing for the solar panel energy to go into, we wouldn't be able to do much. But we actually have, these batteries. I'm going to say batteries, not like the type you put in a television remote control or something, or in a radio, but these larger batteries that stay powered because of the sun's energy. And then, as I mentioned, we also have a little bit of fuel on board, because once, these are lasers, and lasers don't have an infinite life. They will die eventually. Okay, they will just stop working. We had original ISAT-1 satellite that was in space from 2003 to 2009. That eventually the lasers burned out. So we had the fuel on board, so we didn't want to, this satellite, after it stopped working, to just float in space, what's called space junk or space debris. We didn't want that. We didn't want to pollute the skies. Before the advanced technology, we didn't have the ability, we didn't technology to, or the technology to bring them back. But what we did with ISAT-1 is we brought it back. Basically, the majority of it burned up in the atmosphere. And when that happens, it doesn't cause any pollution in the atmosphere. It burns up into the atmosphere. A lot of that goes, that the burn goes, just disappears and goes, some of it goes into space. But then the satellite dropped down what was left of it in the Barents Sea, and we collected what we could of it as we dropped it. So we'll do that with ISAT-2, but right now we have enough fuel on board, and hopefully the lasers will be working till about the year 2039, which is a long ways away, but that's a lot of data in that time. So our fingers are crossed that we're able to do that. But that's a great question. I don't think I've ever heard the renewable energy questions. That's a good one. But that simple answer is that it's powered partially by that, using the sun's energy. It's not like we have, because we can't go up there to fix it if something happens to it, if it wasn't using the sun's energy, like if we were just relying on a particular resource.
Brilliant. Yeah, that's fascinating to hear. I know we're gone way over time, but there are a ton of questions, so I might ask one or two more if that's okay. There was quite a lot of variations of questions about the kind of impact of the laser on the tree. Is there any actual impact? Is the tree aware that it's been lasered? What would happen if you stood under the laser as it's beaming down? And how does
those are all
cool.
good
As to
questions.
how the photons got back, how they knew where to go as well, which is very interesting.
Okay. Yeah, I'll cover both of those. Yeah, so that's a great question, because as you know, if you've ever picked up a laser pen or something, there's always a disclaimer on that saying that there's danger involved with it. And the same thing with the satellite lasers. Like if you're at, right in contact with the laser, right near it, yeah, that would be an issue. But think of it this way. The satellite is about 400 kilometers above the Earth. Okay. And as the laser beam fires, as the lasers fire, as it travels towards the Earth, what's called the photon footprint, okay, as it's traveling, the diameter of the photon, it starts off like a little tiny, like out of a pen, like you see out of a laser pen, but as it's traveling, it basically gets bigger and bigger and bigger. The diameter of it gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And as that happens, the light starts disappearing. Well, what's left over is the energy of the photon. And by the time it travels that 400 meters or so from, I meant 400 kilometers, sorry, not meters, yeah, 400 kilometers, as it travels down, when that photon, that energy hits the ground, it's about a 13-meter diameter footprint. It doesn't contain any light anymore. It's just energy. And the way the photons really don't know where to go, but the reason why they come back to the satellite is that they are traveling so fast. They're traveling at the speed of light because lasers are light. So we know exactly what the latitude and longitude, or the location, is on the ground above the satellite when we fire it. So it's firing down these 10,000 times per second, and it's almost instantaneous that they hit a tree or the ice and then travel back up to the satellite. What I should mention, though, is that, of course, not every laser photon gets back to the satellite, because laser's light, right? And you might have noticed, if anybody you caught that in the video with the photon, is that some of those green photons that were traveling down, some got lost in the clouds, some disappeared. That's what happens because some of them get absorbed in the clouds. Some of them hit the raindrops, the water drops in the clouds and get refracted in different directions and they don't go straight down anymore. But there's lots of things that cause these laser photons to, not make it back to the satellite. And out of these 300 trillion photons that get released with every laser pulse, we only get about 12 back from each laser shot. But that still means is we're getting about 120,000 points of data per second from ICESat-2. So that is a lot of data. And ICESat-2 has measured about 400 billion trees on Earth so far. And that sounds like a lot, but when you compare 400 billion to 3 trillion, trees on the planet, we're not there yet. We need more measurements for sure.
Yeah, it's amazing just to think of the scale of it.
Yeah.
So we're really gone over. I might finish with one final question, and then hand back to Aileen to wrap up, unless she has anything else. But again, this was asked a few times, and I think it's a nice one to finish on. So what is your favorite tree? Hard-hitting question.
So I'm going to answer that with two answers because my favorite tree is the magnolia tree. It's one that I have a big relationship with because we had one when I was growing up in my grandparents' yard that I used to climb, and we had a swing on, and I used to love it. It had great blossoms. It was called a southern magnolia. So it was beautiful. And then we also had a saucer magnolia tree in my great uncle's house in Pennsylvania in the United States. So I have a lot of relationship with that. My favorite tree that I ever measured, and I saw there's a question in here, what is the tallest tree that I ever measured, was called the General Sherman tree. And it's in Sequoia National Park in California, where I contacted the park rangers earlier and I said when my son and wife and I were going to be there on vacation, because surrounding the General Sherman tree is a big wooden fence because they don't want people to go up and touch and pull bark from this iconic tree. They actually knew when I was coming, and I told them what I was doing for that. So I wanted to get a measurement to test this app out. So they actually removed part of the fence when we got there so I could walk to the base of the tree to measure it. And when I measured it at just over 83 meters tall, which is a very tall tree. And in the conversion wise, in the United States, we still use a silly, English system of measurement. So it was 275 feet, but at NASA, we use the metric system. So it was about just over 83 meters tall. So that's the tallest one I ever measured. And if you look in the chat too, there's, I put in there's somebody asked about what the tallest tree is. And that's the name of that tree is Hyperion. And it's, it's like 116 meters tall. It's just an amazingly large tree. And another question was in here that they're about the oldest tree. Let me pop, since we're talking about that. It's basically the Methuselah tree, it's called, and it's about 5,000 years old. It's close to it. So, trees are an amazing thing, and just, taking measurements just as simple as a tree height can help us understand a lot. You can also, with a combination of a tree height and the tree circumference, and based upon the species of tree, you potentially can figure out how old that tree is based on some equations that scientists use, to figure out that. It's not an exact number because different tree species grow at different rates. So, but it's a kind of a generalized way to find out how much carbon a tree has pulled in, how big a tree is, which in turn can help us understand, tree species dependent how old the tree is.
We call that a guesstimation.
Guesstimation. Yep. Guesstimation.
Yeah, and some of the resources that we shared will be able to tell you how to do that. It's looking at the biomass of the tree and how much carbon it stores over this lifespan. It isn't exact, but it's a really good kind of estimation based on previous knowledge. And it actually dates back to the Victorian times, which I think is fascinating as well.
That's fantastic. I just want to say thank you for everyone that has joined us today. First of all, we were so excited to see so many people joining, and we can still see some of you now. So a big wave from all of us to you. Oh, it's fantastic. And this wouldn't have happened if it wasn't for Brian Campbell agreeing to join us all the way from Virginia in America. So big thank you to Brian Campbell as well. We're delighted to hear all his stories and hear what he's working on. And of course, a big thank you to our speakers from Green Schools, from Rob, Nelson, and Claire as well for handling all the questions, and Orla and the Globe team. This has been great. I'm very excited about trees and delighted to go out and measure some more in the future. So well done, everyone, and we'll catch you again soon.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.